And we've got Michael Weinstein, Representative Hugo Soto Martinez, Ada Briceño, Denny, Zane, and Ericka, Lesley, the community leaders that are on the ground. They know what's happening, and it's going to be a pleasure to listen to them and hear firsthand. Thank you. Come on up, Michael. Okay.
Yeah. Should we just go?
Oh, you go ahead. Yeah.
Are we ready?
They're gonna call us.
Okay. Oh, we are. We're going. Okay.
So we have 5 speakers on this panel, and we have only 45 minutes. We'll hear from each person, and then if we have time for some discussion, we'll do it. And if we have time for some questions, we'll do that as well. So if we can start, Ericka, do you want to start?
I defer to Anna.
Okay. Great. Go ahead, please.
So are we just introducing ourselves, or we're sorry?
Well, Jane introduced you.
Okay, great. Well, my name is Ada Briceño. I'm co-president of Unite Here Local 11. Thank you for being here. We represent the workers, the room attendants, dishwashers, and cooks. 32,000 members. We've been in a protracted dispute with the hotel industry. 60 contracts have expired. We call it our 2023 fight because we've been, we struck intermittent strikes for a good 8 months. I'm happy to report that we have victories in 35 of those hotels. And I want to tell you that in the first year of the agreement, we got a 20% increase for our members and a 40% increase overall in the life of the agreement. Our fight was around housing, the reason why we struck and fought, and the conversations that we had to lead up to the strike were about housing, being able to have our members live where they work. And so many of you know that our members and the folks in the hospitality industry many times are one paycheck away from homelessness. And so we have organized our members to understand that housing is crucial and that we have to fight for it. And so we have engaged in many different, innovative ways to try to figure out how to push back to ensure that housing is felt, very strongly. And so again, the contract fight was one of the important ways to do that. We are still fighting, by the way, in 22 or so of our contracts. We're still pushing for that standard. I'll just say one more thing about the fight and move on to other things, and stop me and tell me when I'm done so I don't take my colleagues' time.
Okay.
But one more thing about that is that the conversations that we had with our members, we put a very big proposal on the table to build a housing trust, right? And while we didn't get that, we got every other demand that was crucial to us, changing our members' lives, right? So I just want to say that, but for us it was really important to have that conversation and that fight, and the framing that we did with every single press article across the country that we did was around housing and that need. But for a long period of time across California and really different parts of the nation, we have fought against short-term rentals to protect our housing stock. And we understand how difficult it is when short-term rental is taking out. So across our jurisdiction, we represent folks not only in LA and Orange County, in Southern California and Arizona. We've passed bans and restrictions on short-term rentals. The last one I think was either Monday or Tuesday in Santana, where we have a complete ban of short-term rentals. So these are ways that we are teaching our community, our elected officials, that we have to protect housing, and that is really crucial. So I just want to say that that's another way that we're fighting. And then with last year our members collected, they went door to door in Los Angeles and collected signatures to fight for housing and the unhoused. And as a result of that, we passed the Responsible Hotel Development Initiative to ensure that, when there's hotels that are built, that they don't do away with housing that takes away from the market, but that in fact, if there's hotels that are built, that they replace any housing that is torn down one by one. If there were 60 units that were torn down, they have no choice. By law in Los Angeles, they have to build those 60 units back up of housing. And that was an incredible victory that we had, and that hotel workers who are so crucial. I mean, for us in the hotel industry, as workers in the industry, knowing that these same hotel companies really are the ones that are buying up all the stocks, like Blackstone and so forth. They're the same actors that are, taking our housing, our homes, and buying them. So we are very conscious that we have to fight, the industry, and we have to come up with innovative ways to do that.
And I'll say this, Unite Here, principal co-sponsor of Justice for Renters.
That's right.
Thank you.
So we were out there in March, right, and leading up to March. So all those doors that we knocked on, you should know that we have 9,000 firm commitments to vote for justice for renters, because we went out there and committed people and did the one-on-one that is necessary for them to understand that they're family members and that them as voters, they have to vote for Renters for Justice. So we're really, really proud to partner up with you on that.
Hugo, please.
Yeah, thank you so much, Michael, for moderating this, and also to Dr. Jane Sanders for the invitation. So my name is Hugo Soto Martinez. I'm the council member for District 13. Just recently won my election a little bit over a year ago. And for 16 years before that, I was a proud rank and file member of Unite Here Local 11. I was the lead organizer there for a very long time. Thank you. And as Ada mentioned, the union has always been about centering working people and dealing with their lives beyond a traditional contract. And housing was something that we were always engaged in. And so much of my work that was done there was door knocking, folks about their issues, trying to push elected officials to do the right thing. And so I came in through an extensive organizing background with doing that work before coming into office. And so now you get into office, completely different ballgame. You're now in the machine, you're seeing how the machine works, or not working as designed, it's doing exactly as it was designed. But I think one of the things that I've learned in my new role is that you can actually bring an organizing perspective to the work that you're doing in office. And so when we got into office, very quickly we reached out to many of the organizations doing the on the ground grassroots work. And because of that, we were able to pass 3 historic laws in the city of Los Angeles that had not been done in a generation. One of them was just cause eviction for every single renter in the city of Los Angeles. We passed a rent debt threshold, meaning that if you were a day late and $1 short, you could not be evicted for that. It had to reach a certain threshold. And then finally, if your landlord increased your rent beyond 10%, that they now had to pay for relocation assistance if you were to go to a new apartment. But one of the things that we passed that was part of those 3 packages, and this might sound a little crazy, is that when a landlord filed an eviction for a tenant, that they had to notify the city. Nothing radical, but it's crazy to believe that didn't exist in the city of Los Angeles. And so in July, we received our first sort of batch of this reporting. And we found that in District 13, we had over 5,000 eviction filings. Now think about what that would do to anybody who's ever been around someone facing an eviction. I mean, my staff and I, we were losing sleep for weeks because we're like, how can we do something about this? So we brought an organizing perspective to this. And so what we did was demanded that that list of eviction filings be given to the office on a weekly basis. We hired 2 full-time canvassers that every single day go out and door knock that list that we get in a very targeted geographical area, because let's be honest, we're not going to knock the person that's paying $5,000 in rent. That's probably not the kind of folks that's the most working class marginalized. And so we knock about 600 doors every month talking to folks. And so that really gave us a view into the belly of the beast, right? Talking about people who just cannot pay their rent because of the effects that happened during COVID, habitability issues, tenant harassment, you name it. But we've been able to connect people to some of the services that they desperately need. And then a few months later, we passed emergency rental assistance. So we put tens of millions of dollars. Well, we found that the housing department would send a notification to that person's house and would do the very minimal follow-up. And so you can imagine if you're a renter getting this golden ticket for rental assistance only to find out that your case was closed a few days later because you didn't get back in time, right? And so we once again deployed our canvassing team to call, to email, to mail, to make sure that folks got the rental assistance. And I think because of both of these things that we've done on the eviction filings and the rental assistance program, again, through an organizing perspective, we've been able to bring people closer to government, closer to the office. But as we're doing these contacts with folks, like any good organizer, you ask about what their issues are beyond housing, right? What are the other things that are affecting you? And we always leave that conversation asking them, do you want to be involved on these issues in your local government? And so as a result of doing all those contacts, we now have a list of over 100 people that said, you know what, I want to do more on this issue. Now, that's kind of where we're at right now. I think for the future, we want to continue to work with our allies doing the work on the ground every single day. We want to engage that list of people who they say they want to be part of the solution. And now we got to think about, well, what else can we pass in the city of Los Angeles that perhaps was never imaginable? And so we're looking at a lot of different things that we're cooking right now, including lowering the amount that a landlord can raise on rent-controlled units. It might be a little shocking, but in the city of Los Angeles, you can raise up to 10% even on rent-controlled units. And so we want to model what folks did in Oakland with a 3% cap, with a 60% tied to CPI, which I think would be incredible. But that's just one example of the things that we're doing. But if anything, I think what I want to leave me expressing is that yes, legislation is good, pushing is good, but working with those folks on the ground, having an organizing perspective is truly the way we're going to make a lot of transformational change. But I'm just very happy to be able to represent my district and bringing those Unite HRE values into council. So thank you so much.
I just want to say that I hope this doesn't bother you, but Denny is kind of the granddaddy of rent control in Southern California. He's a veteran of all the wars, and so happy to have you on the panel, Denny. Go ahead, please.
I'd rather be the grandfather than the godfather. And I'm probably every bit as old as that suggests. I want to say a couple things. One, first is I think there's a misunderstanding afoot about what the origins of our crisis is, that the industry and others promulgate a mistaken characterization. Really, it's in their interest. But in the end, we also need to think that our strategies have to be both to prevent the loss of affordable housing as well as to build new. And it's for that reason that we are working very hard now on the Justice for Renters Act. And I really want to thank Michael and the staff at AHF and related organizations for this is the third time around for them, and it's really the most fundamental and essential thing that we can do, and I'll probably share with you why, as well as build. But the paradox here is that, our population is not growing. Usually when we talk about demand and supply problems, it's because the population is growing and we're not building, and we've fallen behind, we've got to play catch up. That's the usual characterization. But our population has not been growing for the last 20 years. It's now falling. For the last 20 years, LA County's population growth is the lowest it's been since 1900, right? Pretty amazing. What has been growing, though, is the share of our population which has very high incomes. And I don't mean billionaires. I'm talking about $150,000, right? Working people getting paid very well has grown dramatically in Los Angeles County. We've added 200,000 households with incomes over 150,000 in the last, since 2005. But we've lost about the same number of low-income people, which is why our population seems so stable, right? And it's not difficult to figure out why. That high-income population is a force to drive up rents, right? And Costa-Hawkins and vacancy decontrol is the reason why a lot of low-income people then are forced out. You know, it's like when those high-income folks are able to drive up rents, property owners get an incentive to try to get rid of that existing tenant because Costa-Hawkins gives them vacancy decontrol and they can rents can go through the roof. In Los Angeles, the last decade, and it's in the housing element, the city of Los Angeles 2010 had 320,000 low-income affordable units under rent control, 320,000. A decade later, they had 200,000. The city of Los Angeles, in just a decade, lost 111,000 affordable units. And the housing element says why. It essentially says rents gravitated to market upon vacancy, vacancy decontrol. And so many of those units would not have been lost if we did not have vacancy decontrol. So I really think all of us must regard the Fight for Justice for Renters Act to be a fundamental objective to address this crisis. The other, we do need to build, right? We do need to build more, in part because those units have been occupied by other people now, and there are tens of thousands of people in the street in our communities, and it's a crisis that's got to have new supply as well. In order to try to address that objective, we at Move LA, and where's Francis Engler at Unite Here, we got together and convened a coalition in their offices. We had been working together for years in Santa Monica trying to fight the good fight for both workers and renters. And we convened a coalition of labor, tenant activists, tenant unions, and affordable housing advocates, and created a campaign that came to be called Measure ULA, the mansion tax. And part of what had happened that led us to think we could win this was that the courts had finally concluded that a voter initiative signature drive, you didn't need 2/3 vote. You needed a majority. We had our democracy back. We needed now to organize, and we did. And the rest is history. The voters of Los Angeles voted 58% yes on Measure ULA. Today, this morning, one of the reasons why I'm blurry-eyed, we had a press conference to celebrate. April 1st was the beginning of the revenue. So here we are at 1 year. And in the first year, Measure ULA has raised $215 million. Now, that's much less than what we expect it will lead, because we know it's a tax on luxury real estate when it's sold, right? Over $5 million, there's a tax. We collect it, in a sense, from the very rich when they sell their property. They don't like it, they're in court, they got a ballot measure statewide to try to overturn it. They're going to lose. We're going to win. That's right. And that revenue will grow. But in addition, Measure ULA and that organizing effort inspired a larger county effort that's collecting signatures now that'll be on the ballot this November. And this one's not a mansion tax. This one's more of a sales tax, more traditional. But if it passes, it will raise $1.2 billion a year. we will have, then together with these measures and the measure we did in Santa Monica, we will have probably on the order of 1.5, 1.6 billion a year that we never had before to build affordable housing with, but also to help prevent evictions, help people get lawyers when they have an eviction notice. If they're in trouble, they need crisis intervention, they need cash. It'll provide for that. And the city of Los Angeles is now, I think, beginning to really embrace this. The mayor, I think, is beginning to really embrace it. And that's a good sign. But it's all because labor and tenants together are powerful.
Great, thank you. Ericka, please.
So that's a hard act to follow. Following after the godfather, I'm sorry, the grandfather. I want to first off start off by telling you my why. My name is Ericka Lesley. I'm the chair of the Santa Monica Rent Control Board. I'm the first African-American woman to be on that
Just
board
fill in for me for 1 minute.
in 2024. During the pandemic, I just had a desperate need to see that all of our people were okay, to stay in their houses, to attain those very vital rental assistance income, to make sure they stayed housed. Also to help people get food. So I was riding around the city just trying to make sure that people got food and, drop off food here and there. Also, when you talk about the hotel workers and not being able to live locally, that's also the same desire for the teachers and the bus drivers. As locally, they were talking about striking as well. I think all of our workforce needs support because as our workforce for Santa Monica and even locally, they're getting driven out further and further, which means that their commutes are longer and longer. And have you looked at the gas prices? And not to mention what food looks like. Imagine living in a city where your food costs more than your neighboring cities, and you having to drive out to get food, so at a lower cost. We have our tenants that are trying to decide whether they're going to pay rent or eat. Our older communities, our disabled, are really struggling. A lot of our families are struggling, not to mention our unhoused population. So we have people a little bit of everywhere that are all struggling right now, and I understand that Justice for Renters will help with that so that people can become more stabilized, because vacancy decontrol is what we need. We have some of the highest rents in Southern California, but the stabilization part is us having rent control, which a lot of places in our state need. Our people are moving out of the state because they say things are just the rent is too damn high. Let's just say it what it is. The rent is too damn high, and people are tired of struggling and not being able to take vacation or even to just spend time with their children because they're working 2 and 3 jobs. And as these things are taking place, it's almost like, and there's no other way for me to put this, and if I'm offending some people, please, I apologize, but then again, no. It's like modern day slavery for everybody, because you're working 2 or 3 jobs and you can no longer see your children if you are low income. We are in a basis of the haves and have-nots, and it's unjust. It should be a human right, and we should not see as many people out on the streets. We have to do better by our people. We have to. We're in desperate need, and we need everybody's help. We all have to face this lift together.
Thank you. My apologies for stepping away for a moment. So a few comments that I'd like to make, and then we'll throw open the discussion. I think that, we hear a lot about programs and about projects and about initiatives, this morning and otherwise. But part of what's left out of that equation is the community voice. Whether that community voice is of organizations doing the work, but even more importantly, where is the voice of the person who is unhoused? Where is the voice of the person who is rent burdened, right? And also, the question is, what's the translation table between these projects and how they're implemented? And that's a question of the bureaucracy, and it's a question of the dysfunction in government at all levels. And the two issues of the community voice and the dysfunction are interrelated. Because, and what I'm concerned about in a lot of the policy making that's going on is it's more and more top-down. It's more and more, this is what we dictate that you will do. California, is the size of many nations, right? One size does not fit all. I mean, what's going to work for renters in rural areas is not the same as what's going to work for renters in big cities. It may seem unnatural for someone to live in an apartment that's 200 square feet, but that may be the best option that's available, right? So all of these things need to be flexible. Also, again, going back to how do we deal with this gargantuan force of the real estate industry, right? First of all, we have to realize that the exorbitant rents that are being charged are financing the campaigns against tenant rights, okay? Because they try to put the pro-renter forces on the defensive, right? That it's anti-housing, that it's, et cetera, et cetera. But, and in the last two efforts around repealing Costa-Hawkins and expanding rent control, the primary weapon they used is confusion. And so it's critical that we have all kinds of validators, people that they trust and that they know, who will explain it in very simple terms, right? And also, we have to, in the course of these campaigns, not just around rent control, but other things, is, who's on what side? In other words, who's on the tenant side, right? And who's on the landlord side, right? And, there is such a thing as the plight of the small landlord, right? Particularly coming out of COVID, right? We're not insensitive to that, right? But when you look at the board of directors of the realtors and you look at the board of directors of the California Apartment Association, they're dominated by these, billionaire enterprises, right? The head of Blackstone made $750 million in a single year, okay? The money that they're overcharging is going for a super yacht. It's going for the 5th, 6th, 7th, 10th home, right? And I think that we have to clearly articulate that. Also, what I would ask, Ada, if you could comment, or Hugo, if you could comment, in terms of engaging the labor movement, how do we get the message across that the increases that the unions have fought for and gained on behalf of their members have been outstripped by the increases in the rent, and that without engaging in the issue of housing and rental costs, they're always going to be playing catch-up?
Yeah, that is a message that has to go out. I think it's imperative, and Denny, talked about this a little bit. The coalition that labor, and housing advocates have created is very powerful. And can you imagine the things that we can do together, to strive for, not only rent control and affordable housing and getting to fix the issues that are holding the residents and the community and our members back. But we have to have people beyond Unite Here, beyond just a few more unions. We've got to expand it to the labor movement, and they've got to be able to see that vision. Most of the labor movement's members are renters. And we've got to be able to convey, Local 11 thinks about, our membership in a very different way. And yes, we do care about what happens to them on the job, and many of the things that we do are moving, our members on the job forward. But what good is it if we only move our members, like the issues that happen on the job, and we're not looking at what happens to them after they leave the job? What happens, as they're going home, or whether or not they can go to, to have a roof over their heads. We have to think of our members as a whole person. And that's what we strive to do at Local 11, and get involved in the issues that are important, like Medicare for All, like, making sure that their families are protected from police brutality and the different things. So we think about our members as a person, not just as a worker, because, it doesn't help. So how do we translate that to the rest of the labor movement? I think we've got to show the coalition that we already have built, and the things that we have beyond housing, what we can do together, because we don't have the luxury of dividing ourselves, on these issues. The more people that we have pushing towards, something collectively, the more successful we are.
I'll chime in on this one. I agree with everything that Ayla is saying. But I think the labor movement does know that. I think most unions would agree that, now labor is not a monolith. In LA County, we have 300 different unions. But I would say that a large percentage of them know that their members are one check away from being homeless, that the rent is outstripping, any increases they can make to their CBA. I think what is lacking is the vision to move forward from that frustration, right? How many unions are out there organizing their members every single day? That is a handful. It's unfortunate, but that is a handful. But what gives me a lot of hope is that those unions that can move beyond the CBA, or collective bargaining agreement, like Unite Here Local 11, like SEIU 2015, right, like UTLA, that are making demands in their contract that is more than just collective bargaining, your traditional, right, the wage, the pension, the health care. I think those are the unions that are going to lead the way and show those other unions that, maybe barely organize or barely have a little bit above the minimum, that there's a way forward, and that is going to be creating alliances that are not traditionally in the labor movement. And I think Measure ULA is a great example of that. It was over 260 organizations that came together and say, the thing that unites all working people is that we are rent burdened. We cannot pay our rent. We cannot live in this city anymore. But beyond that, I think there are many more organizations that are doing a lot of work, that are organizing. Like, now, I'm a proud member of the Democratic Socialists of America. We were doing a lot of organizing there on the ground, and I think my campaign brought so many of those worlds together. I think it's the only one, right, because I could have straddled both of them. But the vision of that movement was, look, despite California Apartment Association spending, $2.9 million in primary and in the general, we mobilized thousands of volunteers. We door knocked, we agitated, we organized, we trained, and we kicked some major butt, right? And so I think that if we can continue to show that vast coalition that is beyond labor, I think we'll see that everyone will be stronger for it, not just in your traditional collective bargaining. But I have a lot of hope. I think that, again, you Measure ULA and what we're doing in the county is going to show us the path, and I think showing the results is going to move more people into action.
Denny?
Yeah, a couple things to add. One is that what I am finding is that there is new leadership coming up in the labor movement with more progressive politics and more interest in the larger community concerns and concerns of other unions and their membership and concerns of low-income people generally, that there is new leadership that really is receptive to that. But also, we as coalition partners have to keep in mind that the leaders of, for example, the building trades, that leadership has also grown, and I think has become very receptive. I mean, Measure ULA would not have happened but for the leadership of Chris Hannon and the building trades. And now he's the state building trades leader, and I look forward to some really important things happening. But these people are elected officials. They have a membership, and their membership has very brass tacks expectations as well. So if we want the more idealistic leaders to be able to join us, we need to also be willing to acknowledge that they have to, deliver, if you will, to their members. So for example, in Measure ULA, what they really wanted was project labor agreements to be included in the funding in projects funded by the measure. And I think everybody, including the housing developers, eventually understood that together we win, and we got 200 million, 400 million a year. If we're not working together, we probably lose and got not much of anything. And that's also was true when we worked on Measure R, Measure M for transit. The early, developing a commitment that the building of the subways and the light rail systems would include project labor agreement, that was a fundamental premise of their engagement with us. And so, what we have found, I think, is that while some were resistant at first, it was a good idea, it was a good bargain, it was well worth doing.
Can I ask, go ahead, sorry.
Okay.
I was going to ask, what would the consequence of a third failure for the repeal of Costa-Hawkins be to the tenant movement in California? Ericka, do you want to comment?
Did you say me?
Yeah.
Okay.
I thought you'd give me the easy question.
Look, I was actually looking forward to speaking to the last one.
Either one.
Okay. So as you talk about thinking outside the box when it comes to union, you need to do the outreach for the 262 tech workers that have been recently laid off. Not to mention, nobody's ever mentioned the gig economy workers who are not unionized, who I'm a former gig economy worker. Those people work long hours and get short paid on the daily. So that is also part of your labor force and your labor movement. A third try for justice for renters that would fail. I hate to say it, but I do believe that it would lead to more people being out on the street. Just to be more families out on the street, more people in RVs, more families living in hotels that aren't being counted as unhoused. So, and that also leads to more gig economy workers because that's the only work that some of these mothers can do while they have their children in school.
How do we communicate that lives depend on it?
Well, the one way that gig economy workers and everybody, the tech workers are, through their language. You have to outreach through social media.
Right. But I mean, just in general, how do we communicate?
Just in general?
I mean, how do we communicate, that this is a life or death issue, and this is an issue of future of California, the future of housing.
So we just talked about, how do we make sure that, I think somehow the question was broached as the labor movement. And we know that labor has the infrastructure already set up, and we have the resources, if you will, to get the work done, right? And to join the other nonprofits. But we start there. It is imperative for us to do one-on-one meetings with the labor movement to get them to understand what that would mean for housing overall. So I'm trying to merge the two right now because time is of the essence, and if we're going to be already out in the streets doing what we need to do in order to protect our democracy, this is a crucial time. We can't only talk about one thing when we go knock on doors or we send a mailer to voters. We've got to be thoughtful and strategic and think about opportunities to get the message to our likely voters of mixing those messages that really resonate with people, and what does and who doesn't resonate with that. So how do we sit down and have these one-on-one really difficult conversations with people about upping their commitment if they already have a commitment, making sure that they're doubling down on it, and then bringing the folks that we haven't, but using all those opportunities. And we have not a lot, but we have a little bit of time from now to November to really have those sit-down conversations with folks and entice them that this is their fight, that this is their, this is one of the most, if not the most important thing on the November ballot.
So I will give you 2. We do outreach to the community-based organizations. Because one thing that is consistent through everyone who said, we are talking about boots on the ground, people that are one-on-one conversations. We also need to see the faces of those affected. We need to see women, children, disabled. We need to see elderly. We need to see it, because if you can see it, you know what it is. It's no longer a game of where we talk about demographics. This has to be personal, because it's personal when you see the people out on the street. It's personal when you walk past somebody that is nameless or faceless because they have been out on the street too long. That's what we need to do.
Denny?
To add-
How are we doing on time?
I think we have to make the message clear that we are losing affordable housing faster than we can build. We must prevent that loss. We must prevent that loss now. The sooner the better. If Justice for Renters doesn't win now, we'll have to try again, because there is no solution without it.
When you're in a hole, stop digging. To close out, Hugo, then Ada, Denny, and Ericka, what closing comment? A minute, please.
Yeah, I'll go ahead. Well, I think in my 1-minute closing, I would say that the thing that I've learned the most being in council, making the transition from an organizer to an elected leader, is that the system is hard. It's hard to move, but I think it's completely worth it. And every day I wake up inspired and a little bit of frustration, but I always go back to my union roots, right? Like, it's our solidarity, it's our community. That's what's going to lead us forward, right? When I walked on the bus for the first time, me and my coworkers, but they asked me to go in the front, and we said we want to have a union. Yeah, I was scared. I felt alone, but ultimately we leaned into the community. So I think this gathering is a wonderful example of many people coming together and recognizing that it's our solidarity, our commitment to love and compassion and a just society that's going to lead us forward. So just thank you for having me, and pleasure being here.
Ada, your last word?
Yeah, I feel that, this being in this particular panel and being alongside with all of you, yes, it is crucial. And what the labor movement, and specifically Local 11, what it has taught me is that, and teaches all of our staff and members and leaders on the job, is that we leave no stone unturned. And when we feel that that is all we can give, then people like Francis Engler there tell us that we have so much more, and push us beyond that limit, that we think that we limit ourselves. And so when we think about Renters for Justice, like, I'm already thinking of all these things that Local 11 and each room attendant and dishwasher can do to make sure that we're moving. So I just implore with you to think about, what limits, sometimes that we limit ourselves, but to really go beyond that, because, when, for hotel workers, when they're fighting against multi-million-dollar corporations, they're so much more powerful than, our members are so much more powerful than they are, because they're willing to push themselves beyond that limit and take risks for the campaign that they believe in. So I hope that you will go out, and do the same in November for Renters for Justice.
Denny?
I think the Labor Renter Alliance that is growing in Los Angeles is the salvation of this community. We need to nurture it. We need to nurture it. We need to expand it. The renter community needs to become a organized, dues-paying, resource-generating partner alongside the labor movement, which already is. That's the way we win.
Eric?
It's so much to say in regards to this in closing comments. I think about us finding our humanity, us looking out amongst our people, whether they're housed or unhoused, finding our humanity and finding how we can help one another, how we can lift each other up, because when one of us suffers, all of us suffers. It affects everyone. So as so many of our community members in each part of our California state are suffering and struggling with rent and bills and everything else, and their mental health is declining, the way that we can lift one another up is to tell our stories and to help with justice for renters so that we can lift one all together.
I'll just say I'll apologize for two things. One is that we didn't have time for Q&A, but I hope people can ask their questions of anyone here during the break. And I sort of apologize for using this forum as a shameless way to organize around justice for renters, okay? It was premeditated. Because I truly in my heart believe it is that important. I'll say that the grassroots effort is well underway. We have already done, it's astonishing, we have done 17 million text messages to voters in the last 2 months, okay? And it's going strong. So we need all the help we can get. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Michael.
Thank you, Michael. You did a great job.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, Santa Monica.